Okay, this is the modified notes, page 12. We are going to look at one more thing. We've talked about R, the correlation coefficient, that tells us the strength of the linear relationship and the direction. If our R is positive, we know we have got a positive relationship, and if it's negative, we know that there's a negative relationship. We've got one other diagnostic. It's called the coefficient of determination, R squared. We won't use it as much as R, but it's important that you know that we can use R squared to tell us the proportion of the variation in the response that's explained by the explanatory. Okay. So in the example from before, if you remember, our R was, what was it, 0.9154? If we square that, we get this R squared, 0.8380. Okay, we're going to round that to 4 decimal places so we can write it as a percentage with 2 decimal places. So let's talk about what this means in terms of some of the problems we looked at before. So example 7, we had an R of -1 for the number of absences and attendance grade. So our R squared is -1 squared, which is +1. So approximately 100% of the variation in attendance grade, remember that response variable comes first in these sentences, is explained by the variation in the number of absences, our explanatory. F, if R is -0.25 for the number of hours watching TV and GPA, then R squared is that -0.25 squared. I get 0.0625. Anytime we square a number, we get a positive. So we have approximately 6.25%. Remember to convert from a decimal to percent. We multiply by 100. So approximately 6.25% of the variation in GPA is explained by the variation in the number of hours watching TV. So our last one here, our R is 0.98. For square footage of house and selling price, when we square that, we get 0.9604. So approximately 96.04% of the variation in selling price of house is explained by the variation in the square footage of the house. And again, at the bottom here is the skeleton sentence. It's perfectly okay for you to revise and say that differently, provided that you make the right connections to the right parts.